vídeo de hoje eu tô trazendo aqui pra vocês a continuidade do último vídeo que eu vi ali, falando sobre o mundo de Runeterra ali, como já se formou muita coisa na Aurora e que provavelmente será utilizado no MMORPG que eles vão lançar, sabe lá Deus, quando se é que vai ser lançado, foi anunciado em 2020 o MMO, então você espera aí mais alguns anos, pelo menos, a produção dessa brincadeira. Se você não viu o meu primeiro vídeo, dá uma olhada aqui, deixa no izinho. E o vídeo que eu vou assistir hoje aqui, então, é falando de raças e classes da lore do MMO. Então bora dar uma olhada aí que esse vídeo tem pra gente.
Well, I'm back. Last time we had a look at the World of Riot's MMO, and we talked about how the overall world design has been done for a few years now. If you have no idea what League's universe is about, I would recommend watching that one first. But now that we learned about the basics, we can dive into the other big MMO topic: the playable races and classes. When it comes to the races, just like the world, they are pretty much done. Over the years, the lore fleshed out the races of Runeterra, and now they each have their own unique story. In fact, at this point, it feels like we know Riot will not make up a brand new race. Of course, they could always theoretically do it, but I seriously doubt they would. Because that would be like forcing a new race into the world of Lord of the Rings. It would feel off among all the already established rules. I strongly doubt you wanna put a bunny person next to Aragorn.
Ah, se você vai lançar o MMO do Lord of the Rings, se não colocar uma bunny dessa aqui, velho, no seu MMO, você estaria cometendo um erro. Com toda certeza. Infelizmente, você tem que forçar assim.
With that said, don't worry, because the lore will allow Riot to make up new races and make them feel natural.
Bom, pra quem tá pegando, né, quando aparece corrida, ele tá falando de raças, tá, galera?
Clever system in just a moment. But for now, just know that, yes, we already know the races of this world. So the question is not going to be what races Riot is going to...
Mas já teve MMO do... E deu certo? O MMO do Lord of the Rings deu certo? Não, né? Por quê? Se eles foram refazer, já sabem onde errou.
Make up. The question is going to be, from the races that already exist, which ones will be playable? And perhaps more importantly, how will they be playable? You see, a few years back, I released a similar video where we talked about the classes and the races together with TB Skyen. And today, I would not recommend you watch that video. Back then, I was still clinging onto the idea that faction-based MMOs were a good idea. It worked for WoW, and it worked for my guilty pleasure, Wildstar. Unfortunately, what I didn't know is that merely a year later, the idea of faction-based MMOs would crumble to dust. That's because faction...
Nossa, isso eu não sabia. Pra mim, MMO em facções sempre funcionou bem. Estou aprendendo aqui. Por quê?
...have a massive flaw. Besides the fact that PvP is almost guaranteed to be one-sided. I mean, who would want to play for the losing side?
Eu. Eu sempre preferi escolher o lado perdedor. Sempre, desde que eu jogava CS, mano, quando eu tinha 12, 13 anos de idade. Isso foi 20 anos atrás, velho. Quem vai no time vencedor é o perdedor, velho. Esse é o grande perdedor. What the hell? Que argumento é esse?
Especially if there is no compensation. Classic WoW is a perfect proof of that. Not to mention...
Meu Deus! Ok, era meio desequilibrado antigamente. Eu não joguei essa época. Não, tá justo, tá justo. É que no clássico WoW era muito recompensado o World PVP, né? Aí teve um problema, né?
Not to mention New World.
Nossa senhora!
Also, if you
não tinha visto. Deixa eu ver de novo isso aqui, velho.
Not to mention New...
Tá justo. É, pelo jeito, quando facções dão prêmios muito bons, dá merda, né, velho? Uma coisa é você brincar, igual eu tô falando aqui no CS, alguma coisa assim, né? Mas quando dá prêmios, aí é complicado você ficar no time perdedor, velho. Sem ganhar nada. Enquanto o time vencedor lá, que você tá enfrentando 10 de uma vez, tá ganhando muito.
New World. But also, if you split everyone into two sides, you are splitting up your player base. And that is almost never a good idea. You simply don't want to prevent people from playing together. The reason why in the past it worked for WoW is because Blizzard heavily played into the faction pride. People were proud to fight for the Horde or the Alliance. But even back then, it really wasn't perfect. And then people started...
Mas mano, é um ponto forte, velho. Era da hora você lutar pela essa facção forte. Era uma coisa muito legal que ainda reverbera até hoje, né? Falei essa palavra certa? Não sei. Mas até hoje é meio forte essa coisa da Ordem e Aliança, né? Funciona legal. Mas eu entendo esses pontos apontados.
Min-maxing the game, and they realized that factions didn't matter. And that's where Riot has the edge. You may know that League of Legends has a lot of different regions, where they all act independently and they all have unique relationships with their neighbors. Because of this, forcing faction alliances into this world would ruin the already established lore. So PvP factions are most likely not going to be a thing.
Eu concordo que é bem provável que não seja coisa, mas esse argumento eu não acho que é tão bom assim, porque no WoW aconteceu isso. Do nada criaram a Ordem e Aliança. Não tinha Ordem e Aliança antes no WoW. Do nada, de repente, mano, ó, quer saber, ó, Horda, esses caras aqui, tipo, tem coerência. Vai falar, ó, esses caras aqui, ó, esses todos são da Horda. Aliança, ó, esses caras aqui, ó. Pega esses aqui, ó, esses aqui são as alianças. Foi tipo um bagulho assim no WoW. Tem um pouco de coesão e coerência, mas algumas histórias assim, tipo, é meio que forçado, empurrado. Juntou ali e foda-se. Tipo, os Undead com a Horda. Tem nada a ver. Não tinha nada a ver. De repente tava junto ali e foda-se. Por quê? Porque sim. No começo não fazia sentido nenhum. O mesmo pode dizer da Aliança ali. A Aliança tem alguns ali que eu não conheço tanta lore assim hoje em dia, mas não faz muito sentido. Sei que na Horda tem a questão dos Taures e os Trolls e... os orcs lá fizeram uma junção no Warcraft 3 assim, mas não é todos exatamente e ainda ingere outras coisas que não tem nada a ver, enfim.
However, despite that, League absolutely has faction pride. People love it when a new Shuriman champion is announced because people love that place. And people love it when the new champion is not Ionian, because goddamn we have too many Ionians. Nearly every League of Legends player has a favorite region. And you bet when the MMO comes out, people will want to play for that region. And this is where the brilliance of Riot's world kicks in. You see, the fundamental lore of League of Legends is based around the idea that anyone can be from any region. After an event the story refers to as the Westward Migration, races mixed up all around the world. So it's not like there is a furry region where you can only see furries. There are definitely regions where you can see more furries, but this world doesn't have exclusives. This means that when you're picking up what you want to play, besides just picking a race and a class combination, I strongly suggest Riot also allows people to pick their origin, with the origin being the starting region. Without a system like this, you would force all human champions to be, for example, Noxian. And that is simply not how this world works. So, I've been mumbling about how this world works for quite a while. So now, let's actually dive into all the races that exist in this universe. Spoiler alert, League doesn't have to...
Mas eu não entendi. Então, tipo, vai ter nacionalidades diferentes, mas... Isso não isso trabalharia o que exatamente dentro do jogo se não vai ter luta de facção, né? Esse é um ponto importante. Gostei do que ele disse, ia ser coerente, mas se não vai ter luta de facção, vai ser o quê então? O que isso vai impactar na... Você começar em tal região? Você ganha um bônus de atributo e foda-se, é isso?
Too many different races? Because it's focusing on depth over variety. Of course, as it is with any RPG, there is the human race. But it would be cool.
Imagina você jogar um jogo que está criando um personagem de um outro mundo imaginativo extremamente incrível e rico e você quer ser um humano patético, velho. Puta que eu pariu, velho. Que vida triste, Rosane. Que vida triste.
Varied depending on their origins. For example, if you pick a human from the Freljord, they would be an Iceborn and they would have extra frost resistance. A Demacian could have a bit more magic resistance.
Então ele vai trabalhar com atributos mesmo, igual eu falei.
Nature resistance, Shuriman's heat resistance, and so on. I think it's going to be crucial for Riot to preserve the feeling of every origin feeling at least slightly different. This is an RPG after all, and despite the fact that balancing is usually a big issue, I strongly believe these RPG elements have to be preserved. But if Riot is afraid of people min-maxing the game from the very beginning, focusing on the origin stat with the most value, Riot can always do the safe thing and only give each origin different customization.
Isso é legal, isso que você tá falando. Deixa ele terminar de falar isso.
In the Freljord, people tend to be more pale, with lush beards and Nordic tattoos all over their bodies.
Da hora.
Shuremans have the classic dreadlock style. People from Bilgewater have the pirate crew tattoos. Piltovans are your fancy mustache people. And Ionians have the wild, untamed hair and beards. So even without special origin stats, I do believe these unique character customizations would enhance the region pride too. So, that's what humans would be about.
Mas aí, ó, não sei se ele vai falar mais de nacionalidade, tipo, você só dá umas mecânicas e um visual diferente, não dá um apelo ao orgulho da região necessário pra você continuar mantendo essa questão de orgulho, de facção, que eu acho da hora. Acho bacana, acho divertido, né, brincar de Ordem e Aliança aqui, tirando sarro de Aliança, sendo o pessoal da Ordem. Tipo, eu acho que o jogo teria que implementar um pouco mais que isso. Talvez não uma guerra de facções, mas alguma coisa. Vamos ver.
Pretty versatile and nothing too special in an RPG world. So now, let's have a look at the more unique races. After humans, the second most spread out race are the Vastaya. As we mentioned in the last video, the Vastaya are a race that came to be after humans started mating with magical animals. But the thing is, depending on where they are
são furry de natureza já mesmo, mano. Que porra é essa?
From, there are loads of different kinds of...
Caralho, pode ser qualquer merda animal, velho. É isso? É um humanoide animal X, assim, ó. Joga um dado, foda-se. Morcego. Morcego, mano. Que porra é essa? Que horrendo.
Vastaya. From cat boys to fox girls to lizard girls. In fact, here's a family tree of all the Vastayan tribes, and even this doesn't cover all of them. And this is where Riot can pull off something genius. As I said, this world already has set rules, so it would be very difficult to introduce a brand new race into this universe. However, it is going to be very easy to just make up a new Vastayan tribe.
Né?
So I propose that Riot doesn't...
Qualquer merda de tribo você pode botar aqui, pelo jeito, velho. Coloca lá, mano, o porco, coloca lá o tubarão, velho, que parecia um multi lá no vídeo anterior, né?
Make the Vastaya as a playable race overall, but instead it would be cool if Riot let the specific tribes to be playable races. This would leave the door open for them to introduce new playable races later down the line. If they cross off all the Vastaya at once, they kinda shoot themselves in the foot. But I know, here I go mumbling about how the world works again. So let's have a look at some of the specific tribes. When I say Vastaya, most people think of Ahri. She comes from the Vistani that look like foxes. Although her tribe is mostly gone, the lore can justify new members to be found, so they can be playable. The Kilash tribe comes from the jungles between Shurima
são bem
and
variados
Kishta.
mesmo.
These lion-like people are known for hunting dangerous beasts, and they
Os
take
warging?
great pride in trophy collecting. It's the average mount collector. The Shimon tribe are monkey-like people from Ionia.
Da hora.
While their older members are very
Caralho, vou criar um
nice,
macaco
their
fácil,
younger
velho.
members can be
Caralho, um macaco tóxico, mestre do PVP imbatível, hein, velho? Puta que eu pariu, velho.
very goofy. The Otrani come from Mount Targon, resembling the classic goat people. Their hobbies are taking care of the Stellarcorns. The Lothland tribe are Ionians who resemble bird people. This tribe likes to combine the art of dancing with lethal assassinations. The Ubikat are something close to lizards, though they do have the ability to shapeshift. Out of all of the other tribes, these are the closest to their pure blood ancestors. And we also technically have the Marai, the fish people whom I doubt are going to be playable. Imagine modeling boots for them. Now, these were the more pure blood tribes, but there are many more Vastaya who don't fit any of these. For example, Set has an Ionian Vastayan mother and a Noxian human father, so he doesn't really have a tribe. Long story short, the Vastaya are an incredibly versatile race and Riot can use them in a million different ways. This is where they can really go wild. But that's it for the Vastaya. So now, let's have a look at the third most popular race, the Yordles.
Credo.
These are the classic RPG tiny people. In League of Legends, people either adore them or hate them. There is no in between.
Suponho que eu sou
Kinda
cara
like
que
those
odeia.
guys. But not those guys, everyone hates them. There is no doubt in my mind that Yordles will be playable, even though they have an interesting catch. You see, unlike all the other races...
Mas não tem como gostar de raça pequena assim, velho. Não tem, velho. E tem sempre essa putaria, né? Tipo, o cara igual o Gnomo mesmo, usando o Gnomo, sendo guerreiro tanque no WoW, velho. Não tem como levar a sério um bagulho desse, velho. Não tem, velho. O cara tá lá com a armadura de um escudo gigante lá, tancando a porra do Deathwing ali. Você fala, mano, que porra é essa? A sua existência está estragando o meu jogo, velho. Estragando o meu jogo. Não conheço, já odeio.
Yordles are immortal. They are essentially modes of magic that come from a hidden magical realm known as Bandle City. And because they are made of magical essence, when they die, we don't really know what happens. But we assume they return to the Bandle City and there they respawn.
Então como ele sabe que é imortal?
With that said, the lore suggests that maybe Yordles can die, but they just can't die of old age. But let's ignore that, that's a massive rabbit hole. So, you know, when it comes to gameplay, at least corpse running is going to make sense for them. Now, because Yordles are immortal, in most cases they are always happy and cheerful. Even their home realm is very colorful because of that.
Jesus.
But then there is also Vex, a Yordle champion who has recently been added into League of Legends.
What the fuck, velho? Eu tenho a gótica rabuda anã, velho. O que é isso?
Who gives Yordles an interesting perspective. You see, unlike all the other Yordles, Vex hates living. She hates the bright colors and the cheerfulness. You know, it's the average League player. So Vex is constantly in deep depression and agony. All she wishes for is to leave this world, but she can't, because Yordles can't die.
Meu Deus, eles podem morrer
just
mesmo.
like all the other races, Yordles can be found all around Runeterra.
É a única, teoricamente, questões de lore. Se o MMO quer se levar muito a sério, talvez eles só deviam disponibilizar essa raça para as pessoas jogar, né? Porque é a única raça imortal e player não pode morrer, né? Então, fica a ideia. Todo mundo só joga com essa raça bosta aí.
There is Poppy in Demacia, Kled in Noxus, Kennen in Ionia, Rumble in Shurima, and so on. But now, so far we have only covered the races which I'm pretty sure will launch with the MMO. The humans, the Vastaya, and the Yordles are the core of this world. So now we are diving into the races that still exist in this universe. But it's going to be up to Riot if they make them playable. First of all, there are the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs are different from the Vastaya because they don't have magical ancestors. They are just a standalone race. Originally, the Minotaurs controlled the mountains south of Noxus.
Mano, já tô vendo. Vou criar um... Mano, eu quero muito que dê pra criar aquele macaco mago, velho. Macaco mago, Minotauro guerreiro. Ou se puder criar um Minotauro... Ah, ele acabou de falar que não dá pra usar mago, né? É isso que eu vou fazer, velho. Um Minotauro da porrada, velho. E um macaco tóxico, mestre do mago, velho. Pode ser um xamã macaco também, velho.
But because Noxus is Noxus, soon they absorbed the Minotaurs into their empire. With that said, some Minotaurs fled the tyranny of Noxus and they joined the other regions. A great example is Kryl, the Minotaur fighting in the elite armies of Demacia.
Tem algum campeão no LoL?
Tadeu, bora sair do HS.
Tem algum... Bora sair do HS. Tem algum Minotauro campeão no LoL? What the hell? Isso é um Minotauro? Isso é um cavalo rabudo, velho. Que merda é essa? É porque é mulher, né? Tem que ser rabudo. Tá certo. Tem que ter um peitão. Tá beleza. Tá beleza. Alistar. Deixa eu ver. Vê esse cara aí. Porra, ele é roxo, mano. Por que ele é roxo? Ele é bravo. Ele é bravo. Que genérico esse... Que bosta. Quer dizer, tem 4 chifres, né? Suponho que ele tem isso ao seu lado.
And yes, the Minotaurs also have the stereotypical sexy female version in this universe, so they can easily be turned into a playable race. Next, in Bilgewater, there is an incredible amount of weird fishy people. A lot of these could be really cool playable races when Bilgewater gets its expansion. Although modeling helmets for a hammerhead shark is going to be interesting. We also can't forget about the trolls. Previously I showed you the ice trolls, but there are also the sand trolls. And here's an interesting fact for League veterans. We have never seen a sand troll, but because of Ezreal's adventures, we know they exist. They should be around Icathia, which is where Jax is from, who also has 3 fingers, by the way. So it is extremely likely that the mysterious Jax is a sand troll. Regardless, the majority of trolls are united under Trundle, the self-proclaimed Troll King, who is fighting in the service of Lissandra, who is a baddie even though she is morally right. So since the majority of the trolls are our enemies, I doubt they will be a playable race. Lastly, let's not forget that this universe also has Yetis. Fun fact, before everything got frozen, the Yeti civilization was very advanced. They even had their own technology based around magic. In fact, Willump, the Yeti Nunu is riding on, is a hologram from the Yeti technology. But then, as the civilization disappeared, the Yetis went a bit more ferocious. So no, they won't be playable either. But that's pretty much it for the races.
Tipo, é o que eu imaginava mais ou menos, né? Ele teve a carta na manga ali, dos furries ali, né? Que pode ser qualquer merda, aparentemente. Mas raças desenvolvidas do mundo, praticamente, ele falou 3, né? Os furries, os humanos e os anão peludo lá. Sei lá que porra é aquela. Então, tipo, isso me preocupa. Mas nos furries ali é a carta da manga deles, né? Pode ser qualquer merda. Então, beleza. Tem bastante raça, eu suponho.
As I mentioned, there aren't too many different kinds, but that's because Riot is avoiding mimicking other RPGs. That's why there are no dwarves or...
Eles estão tentando não imitar outros RPG. Por isso, não tem outras raças. Não, justo. Entendi o ponto. Entendi.
Elves here. Runeterra is simply trying to be unique in every way, and so far, it is working. Now, I also have seen some people asking if Darkin will be playable. To which I have to say,
no.
That's like asking if you can play as a god. The Darkin are a corrupted version of the Ascended God Warriors. A single Darkin can annihilate an army of 1,000. In fact, the Darkin known as Aatrox is the only being in existence that managed to kill a celestial god. He stabbed someone wielding the power of the Aspect of War so hard, the Aspect of War died. So no, I don't think Darkin will be playable. Anyway, with all the races covered, assuming Riot is going to use the Origin system, this is what the playable races could look like.
Ah, interessante. Ok, então tem as coisas de humano pode ser tudo, lógico. Os Vacianos pode ser um monte de coisa. Que porra é isso aqui? Ah, isso aqui tem que ser a raça específica daí nessas regiões, é isso? Entendi. Da hora. Os Jordan pode ser quase tudo também. Os Minotauros. Os Minotauros parecem tão avulso. Tanto é que me falaram que só tem um Minotauro na porra do LoL, velho. Mas tudo bem, eu aceito Minotauro.
Humans are versatile, they are everywhere. There is not much to mention there. When it comes to the Vastaya, the common tribes can easily appear in Noxus, Piltover and Bilgewater. These are the regions open to everyone. On the other side, the Vastaya are closely linked to spiritual magic, so you will hardly find one in Demacia, since it is a firmly anti-magic region. And somehow, not many Vastaya were ever mentioned in the Freljord, so Riot doesn't have to force them there. But then we have Shurima, Ionia and Targon. Assuming these would be saved for expansions, they could be used to introduce new playable races. Since I doubt all the newcomers remember the names, the Kilash, Lothlan and Otrani are the Lion people, Bird people and Goat people. When it comes to the Yordles, as I mentioned, they can originate from anywhere, but they do avoid the Freljord and Targon.
E aí a maioria humana, esse argumento eu acho que é ruim. Eu acho mais interessante o argumento do cara que ele falou que eles tentam não se aproximar muito dos outros RPG e fazer as obviedades e anão e elfo. Mas anão e elfo vende legal, por que não venderia?
Because of the harsh climates. And yes, I know there were some prehistoric Yordles in the Freljord, but after it got covered in ice, they disappeared. And
Porque esse
lastly, the
argumento é
Minotaurs
real?
can be found in Demacia and Noxus.
É sério? Falou hater de anões? Não, eu odeio gnomo. Completamente diferente. Ele é menor e mais estúpido. Completamente diferente. Eu me referi os Jordens a anão porque foi equivocado da minha parte. É uns gnomo peludo. Completamente diferente.
But it does make sense for some of them to flee to the Freljord
Skins de
and
monstro não
others
vendem
to travel
muito,
to Ionia
caralho.
during the invasion. With all of this said, remember, this is just my decently educated opinion, since the races are pretty much mixed up all
Talvez isso
over
não.
Runeterra. Riot could also lift the limitations and let every race start in every region, and I would be fine with that. Some story would be wonky, but it wouldn't be anything horrible. Although, I still believe some racial exclusivity helps the feeling of RPGs. So, all of this is still only the first half of the video. If you wanna take a break and do your business without washing your hands,
Não.
now's your chance. Okay, so far we only covered the races, which was definitely still the easy part. The much more difficult part are going to be the classes.
Com certeza.
This is where Riot is facing a great challenge. Partially, it's because there are inherently no wrong answers when it comes to designing a class system. You can really make anything work if you put some thought into it. But more than that, Riot is challenged by the setting itself. League of Legends currently has over 160 different champions. They each have unique abilities and together they can define about 40 different classes.
Nossa.
I counted them myself. From these, Riot has to pick only a handful to be playable, which means the majority of the classes won't make it in. And people who love those classes
Puta, eu não conheço nada de LoL, né? Mas não vai ter muita coisa xamânica, né? Acho que não é muito a pegada do LoL. Fudeu.
will be disappointed. Thankfully, I'm not a designer, so instead of trying to figure out how to make this work, I'm going to show you all the
Tem
cool
muita coisa?
unique classes
Tem alguns?
this universe has. And again, because
hora.
region pride is a big part of this
Não, um no certo, tem que ser vários, galera. Ele acabou de falar, velho. Tem 40 classes diferentes, velho. Tem que ser vários. Entende? Esse é o problema. Tem que ir o que é popular.
universe. You'll see that some of these are tied to specific regions. But not the warrior. That one is different in every single region. So let's start with that. The warriors in this universe provide a unique challenge on top of the already difficult decisions. It's because in every region the fantasy of a warrior is represented by something else. In Demacia it is the Dauntless Vanguard. These are the classic knights in shiny armor pursuing justice. In Noxus, the traditional warrior would be part of the Trifarian Legion, which is a rank you can achieve after killing your best sparring friend in combat. These guys rarely use shields. In Shurima, the classic warrior is the warrior of the Golden Army. These are fighting for the glory of the Shuriman Emperor. In Piltover, you would have the Enforcers. Simply said, it's the cops. People will know these from Arcane. But in a way, the Wardens are the melee warriors of Piltover. But then, in the Freljord, warriors are represented by the Berserks, either wielding axes or giant blades as they worship the primal god known as the Iron Boar. On Targon, we have the Warriors of Rakor, which are somewhat themed after the classic Spartan armor.
Nossa, caramba, ele só tá falando de guerreiro já é impressionante quão variado é de fato. Aí se tornaria muito complexo, mas a primeira coisa que vem à cabeça, né, é você ter esses guerreiros tendo a mesma estrutura, mas tendo algumas habilidades diferentes dependendo da nacionalidade que você escolhe. Mas isso talvez só funcione para guerreiro, né? As outras classes ficariam muito mais difíceis e talvez não seja viável isso.
Armies. Then, in Ionia, the classic warrior is known as a Blade Master, with samurai-styled swords that have a rich history in this region. Also, there are the Vuju Blade Masters, which are on a totally different level. The Vuju technique is so powerful it was forbidden from using it in combat. The TLDR version of the story is that when Noxus invaded Ionia, Master Yi obliterated entire Noxian legions on his own. before Noxians realized how overpowered he was and they nuked the town where the Vuju Blade Masters were trained. So now there is no more Vuju Blade Masters, just normal Blade Masters. And lastly, the common warrior in Bilgewater would be a brawler. You see, I just named 8 different kinds of warriors. How is Riot going to handle this? I don't know. They could just make one warrior class and then just have the players play out the fantasy while wearing cool armor sets. Or they could make it so that every origin has a different skin of the class. You know, all the abilities would be the same, they would be doing the same numbers, but when a Noxian swings a weapon, there is a bloody trail, and when an Iceborne Berserk swings a weapon, there is a frosty effect. But again, this is for Riot to figure out. Now I'm just going to show you all the unique and interesting classes from this universe. In Demacia, we have the Mage Seekers. These are the people who hunt down mages. They carry with them a stone disc called the Grey Mark. This is...
What the fuck? Isso seria uma classe, mano? Você jogar com os racistas, velho? What the fuck?
is the tool that allows them to absorb magic. So this would be sort of an anti-magic class. There are also a lot of iconic Demacian scouts. Also, Demacia has a lot of stories about theaters and bards. But Demacia also brought spotlight onto the Sentinels. The Sentinels of Light are people dedicated to fighting the undead. Because the undead can't really be killed with normal weapons. They use the relic stones that can be forged into any weapon. Be it a crossbow, a gun, a really big gun, or even a sword. Fun fact, in the lore, the Sentinel guns don't have triggers. You have to will it to fire with every fiber of your body. So of course, Lucian canonically fired it with his PP. Lastly, this will be... Lucian canonically fired it with his PP. Lastly, this will be unknown to even veteran League players. But Demacia put a really cool twist onto the Paladin class. You see, in League of Legends, when you play as Garen, his ultimate is to smite his enemies with a giant holy blade. This made people wonder, is Garen a mage? In Demacia? Actually, no. In the lore, Garen has never done anything even similar to this. And that's because there is something even cooler happening. Most people in Demacia pray to the aspect of justice, which they call the Winged Protector. That's why Demacia has a lot of angelic statues. Coincidentally, the aspect of justice can also be found in League. It's Kayle. So what's happening is that when Garen is casting his ultimate, it is not him magically creating a holy blade in the sky. It is actually the aspect of justice answering his call. So even though this universe doesn't really have a Paladin class, which would be casting holy spells, this would be a really cool alternative. People who worship the aspect of justice and let her answer their...
Então os racistas pregam a justiça, oram para um deus, e o deus faz uma coisa que não é magia, e eles decidiram que não é magia, porque é o deus fazendo um bagulho. Meu Deus, parece o texto passando pano, né? Que porra é essa, velho? Simplesmente chegaram e falaram, ah, isso aqui pode. Isso aqui pode.
Goals. Pretty cool, but now let's move on to Noxus. Noxians are one of the only regions who harvest black powder, so they also have their own mercenaries with functional guns. In Noxus you can also find a lot of demonic cultists, so I would expect a warlock or a demon summoner, and they also have a few renowned assassin guilds. And the most unique of them all, Noxus also has a circle of Hemomancers, people who follow Vladimir, a lord who used to be a hostage to the Darkin, and who eventually learned how to use their blood magic. So these people use the very same blood magic that shaped the Darkin. Then in Shurima, we may find Arcane Mages.
Nossa, mas ele tá indo muito longe com esse vídeo mesmo. Realmente ele tá dando tiro pra todo lado. Tipo, ele não tá falando de classes No guerreiro ele falou de uma classe que poderia ser que varia em 8 formas diferentes. Agora ele tá falando de regiões, coisas bem regionais, né? Classes bem regionais e tá falando umas 3 diferentes. Isso nunca daria certo. Você tem que fazer algo mais específico.
These people follow Zerath, the most powerful mage on Runeterra, whose body has been reduced to nothing but arcane energy. I would honestly love to see this class in-game, because I love the idea of having an Archon form on cooldown. Shurima also has some prophets who can open up tiny portals into the void and summon tiny void creatures. It would be sort of like Warlock in WoW. You know, use the power of the enemy against themselves. Then there are the Sand Shifters, people who can use the sand to create sand mirror images. And we can't forget about the Chronomancers, people who use time magic in a lot of creative, interesting ways. Then, in Piltover, riding off of the success of Arcane, people will want to play as a Warden, which is a more elite version of the Enforcers. These would be equipped with sniper rifles and stun grenades. On the crafty side, there are also the Hextech Engineers. These are the people who can use science to allow them to...
Esse é o cara com o pé zoado lá, né? É? Não sei, parece. Eu sinto que é ele. Não sei.
Wield magic even if they are not
Victor.
mages. And separate from them, there are also the Artificers. To them, anything from a powerful arm to blade legs should be possible. And down in Zone, I would love to see some kind of an alchemist who's using questionable drugs to help his allies. Next we go into the Freljord. Here we can find the Draklorn Inquisitors, which are Lyssandra's followers with abilities themed around true ice. Essentially, these would be frost battle mages. But perhaps the most iconic for the Freljord would be the Shamans. These worship the animalistic primal gods of the Freljord, and all their abilities mimic the primal gods, be it a bear, a fox, a mammoth, or a boar. Then on Targon we would find a lot of people with celestial powers. You know, calling down stars and such. But there are also the Solari who use the power of the sun to enhance their attacks. They also wear massive plated armor, so this would be the tank class. Or the Lunari who use the power of the moon to stay in the shadows. This would be more of an assassin class. Besides these, there are also a lot of Starcallers around, and even Draconic worshippers. Then in Ionia, besides the Vuju Blademasters, which would be far too overpowered, some people choose to fight without a blade. These would be the monks of Hirana. They channel the power of Ionian dragons to empower their limbs. And don't worry, they are a bit different from the traditional monks. They are far more badass. Think less Bruce Lee and more Dragon Ball. But of course, Ionia is also home to the Kinku ninjas. Their goal is to maintain balance in Ionia. This means that when a spirit starts killing people, the ninjas go out and deal with the spirit. And when people start terrorizing the spirits, the ninjas go out and deal with the people. Most of these are your classic ninjas empowered with spiritual magic. But some are using the forbidden shadow technique. And while they surely look evil, just like anything in League of Legends, it's not really one-sided. These ninjas are simply using questionable techniques to protect their homeland. And honestly, the Shadow Ninjas are so iconic for Ionia, I really do believe they will be playable. Then we get to Bilgewater. Besides all the things that you could do with pirates and monster hunters, the most iconic class of this place are the priests of Buru. The Buru worship the god of motion called...
Sacerdote do Buru. Você pensa sacerdote que vai ser um cara mó gente boa, velho. Os caras são... Que porra é esse Buru, mano? Que merda é essa, velho? Os caras são os brutamontes do mal, velho.
While they are priests, they fight with full physical strength, while borrowing power from the god to empower themselves.
Da hora.
Usually this means the god spawns tentacles to smack the enemies around. But they also have healing powers. So that would be a really cool support class.
Da hora.
In Riot's RPG called Ruined King, you can play as Illaoi, the High Priestess of Nagake Boros.
Boom.
And there you can see all the attacks she can pull off. And this takes us to the last place, Ixtal, which will most likely be saved for an expansion. As I mentioned in the last video, Ishtal specializes in only one thing: elemental magic. So if elemental mages become a class, and they should, even in League, elemental dragons are a core mechanic. They would come from Ishtal. But that's it for all the unique classes this universe has to offer. Funnily enough, when I was drafting all these classes, I realized a lot of them fall under specific categories. So going with the skin idea for all the classes wouldn't be too unreasonable. But developing so many artistic variations of the classes would be taxing. So overall, I believe Riot should not care about disappointing some players for not including their favorite class. With so many options, it's going to happen anyway. Instead, pick a couple of classes that simply make sense for you. You know, a Blade Master here, an Arcane Mage there, and just have fun. Having fun during development usually translates into great experiences. And I hope I'm not pressuring anyone by stirring up hype. If anything, I'm just happy that people find these videos interesting. And all I'm doing is presenting information that Riot released over the past 10 years. I mean, I know the video is interesting because Asmon only paused 3 times and he said,
"That's fucking cool."
And
I like it a lot.
And
that's what the fuck? This is actually really cool. I didn't know any of this.
That to me marks a big success. Next time we are going to talk about all the already established raid bosses of this universe, which is a very personal topic for me. You know, I am a father, my son is 2 years old. So by the time this MMO comes out, he's going to be just the right age to heal my raids.
Ok, peraí. Bom, ó, espero que o criador desse MMO esteja me ouvindo, que eu vou explodir a mente dele com boas ideias agora nesse momento, ok? Duas coisas aqui, né? Ele cita como tem classe diferente nisso tudo aí. Eu não acho que ele tem que ir pra skin. A ideia de skin é superficial e chata, ok? Então, a primeira mais interessante aqui que ele aponta sobre a questão de nacionalismo, que é da hora você apoiar a causa do seu bagulho lá, porque é da hora você apelar pra isso. A mais óbvia que você pode partir, né, é você fazer essas classes igual ele separou, e você ganha algumas skills únicas, dependendo de onde você pega o bagulho. Mas ó, agora a ideia genial aqui, velho. Que eu acho que nenhum MMO fez isso exatamente, a não ser que você contar... Acho que nenhum MMO fez exatamente, a não sei se você conta Path of Exile como MMO. Mas seria muito da hora se um MMO fizesse um rolê igual Path of Exile para suas skills. Tipo, você poderia englobar tudo isso aqui, velho. Cada classe seria um círculo, daí tipo, todos os magos lá estariam próximos. Aí você vai mais pra bruxa com isso aqui e isso aqui. Então você ia poder fazer builds bem únicas e bem da horas de classes. Muito diferente. Não teria uma classe específica. Você teria um monte de coisa doida que você poderia fazer. Então você poderia fazer um guerreiro, mano, um semi-mago, velho. Daria pra fazer umas coisas muito bacanas. Porque você ia mostrar que você é um guerreiro tal coisa, mas você viaja o mundo, tá ligado? Então é coerente que o seu personagem conheça outras técnicas. Então em questão de lore é coerente. E o segundo, que eu acho que o maior erro do WoW hoje em dia... é construir o seu mundo pensando apenas em raid, que é isso que faz o WoW ser legal. A raid é legal, mas o processo de upar eles melhoraram, mas não é tão interessante assim ainda. Então, tipo, eu acho que a parte de upar, se você bota quests bossas, é um lixo. Mas se você foca igual tipo Genshin Impact, que você tem um processo de exploração muito da hora, enquanto você vai fazendo, você vai upando o personagem... é muito bacana você ir upando o personagem aos pouquinhos e você ir upando e ganhando novas habilidades doidas enquanto isso. E aí você foca mais nesse processo de você upar e raids, que pode ser interessante. Você faz sei lá, uns patamares de levels diferentes para que as pessoas possam aproveitar as raids em levels diferentes. Alguma coisa assim. Então, é isso. Essa é a minha ideia. Sei lá, eu achei genial, desculpa aí. Por mais que seja já meio batido, de certa maneira, a árvore do Path of Exile, eu não vi nenhum MMO tentando fazer isso ainda, né? Não sei se eu tô errado, mas eu não vi. O Lost Ark, o bagulho da Amazon não fez assim. E mano, poderia acoplar isso tudo, velho. Poderia acoplar isso tudo. Seria lindo. Seria da hora pra caralho. Daí tem a questão do balanceamento, né? Balanceamento seria impossível balancear. Aí eles teriam que meter nerfs e buffs e dar pra todo mundo dar reset com os pontos que tem, velho. Sei lá, uma merda assim, né? Não é difícil arrumar a bosta. Se o inferno balancear. Isso é de menos, eu acho. Na moral, velho. Se... O que importa... Você tem que pensar aonde isso vai impactar, né? Então, tipo... O que vai impactar é raids e PVP. O desbalanceamento. E aí no PVP, velho, você faz o PVP não ser tão importante assim, velho. Tipo, mais pela diversão e se balanceia como pode. Mas seria um inferno balancear, concordo. Mas eu acho que seria uma ideia bem inovadora. E o LoL faz trabalhos inovadores, então o vídeo é esse. Eu acho que é isso. Então eu espero que você tenha curtido. Curtiu a ideia? Curtiu o vídeo? Deixa o like, subscribe. Vamos ficando por aqui. Um abraço a vocês todos e até mais!